Okay, we're going to look at just a couple more examples of factoring trinomials because I know some of you are having a little bit of difficulty with this concept. And to be fair, it is a little bit of a difficult concept. So let's just review a couple of examples here. Okay, so here's the key thing to remember. Trinomials are always written in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And then our a, our b, and our c, they're normally just replaced with some numbers. So maybe it would look like y equals 3x squared plus 2x plus 1. This would be a trinomial, but we're not even looking at these kind of trinomials. And the reason we're not is because we will never deal with any trinomials that we're going to have to factor that has any number other than 1 in there. So all of our trinomials are going to look like, instead of 3x squared, maybe it'll just be x squared plus 2x plus 1. And this makes our life when it comes to factoring a whole lot easier. So what we do here, whenever we factor trinomials, and let's start probably easiest by just taking a look at an example. So for example, let's look at y equals x squared plus 8x plus 15. So here's how it works. This number in the middle and this number on the outside. These are our keys. We need to find two magic numbers, and here's how it works. Our two magic numbers need to add up to the number in the middle. Our number in the middle is 8. They also need to multiply to the number on the outside. Now, a lot of students find this process the hardest. Some tricks and some tips that might make this easier for you. Very first thing I would do is I would take a look and say, okay, this number that I'm multiplying to, is it positive or is it negative? Well, here it's positive. If this number is positive, both of our numbers are going to have the same sign. So that means we're going to have either positive and positive or negative and negative. But let's say that was negative 15. If it was negative 15, how do you get a negative number? Well, you have two different signs. So when you have two different signs, that means you're going to have always a positive and a negative. That sometimes helps when we're trying to figure out what could our numbers possibly be. Another thing that helps us kind of try to figure out what our numbers are figuring out, okay, well, what things multiply up to 15? And I always like taking a look at that first before figuring out what numbers add to 8. So it's always best to start with our multiplication and then try to fit them in to our addition. So let's take a look at our multiplication. What numbers multiply to 15? Well, we can say, okay, we have 1 and 15. That's not going to work because if we put 1 plus 15, well, that's definitely not going to add up to 8. So what other things? Well, 1 and 15 don't work. What else multiplies to 15? What about 3 and 5? 3 times 5 multiply to 15, and 3 plus 5, well, those equal 8. So that's perfect. That's going to be our magic numbers. So when we factor this, how this works, this is our magic number, this is our magic number. All we do, we have x and we have x. When you factor, you're trying to break this down into its components. So what are its components? Well, we're going to have one set of brackets here, and we're going to put one of our magic numbers in there. What's this magic number? Well, it's positive 3. So we'll put positive 3. The other magic number is positive 5. So we'll put that over there. So we have factored this into its components. Some questions might even ask you, okay, once you've factored, what are the roots? And that's actually a pretty easy thing once you have this. To get the roots, all you ever do is just flip the signs. So again, if it asks you for the roots, just flip the signs that are in here. So our positive 3 is going to become negative 3, and our positive 5 is going to become negative 5. Sound good to me? Perfect. Let's take a look at another example. And we can come up with ones that might have some negative signs in there. And those are always a little bit more tricky, but we can take a look at that if we'd like. So let's take a look at x squared plus x minus 12. Now, we need to come up with two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and two numbers that add up to whatever number's in front here. What number is in front there? Well, it's imaginary. You can't really see it, but there would be like a little 1 in there for us, but we can't see that. They don't write it. So what are our two numbers going to be? We have to add up to that middle number. That is an imaginary little 1. And we have to multiply to negative 12. And let's take a look. What does this negative sign means? It means that one number is going to be positive and one number is going to be negative. How do I know that? Well, I wrote it right there. Negative means our two numbers are going to have different signs. Okay, looks good. So what could our two numbers be? Well, let's think about all the things that could multiply to 12. We have 1 and 12. Those things, when you add them up, are definitely no way going to fit into 1. What about 2 and 6? 2 and 6, well, those things are not going to get into 1 either. What else multiplies to 12? What about 3 and 4? 3 times 4 is 12. That looks good. What about 3 plus 4? Well, that doesn't equal 1, but there is a way. Remember, we needed one of these things to be negative. How do we know that? Well, we have this negative sign here. Remember, we need different signs, so we need one negative number in there. So what negative number could we choose? Well, we could choose either. Let's try to see how it looks. If I choose this negative 3 times 4, well, that's going to give me negative 12. And if I have negative 3 plus 4 on your calculator, that's going to give you 1. Perfect. Those are my two numbers. What if I screwed that up, though? What if I said I'm going to use negative 4 and negative 4? Well, 3 times negative 4 is still going to give me negative 12, but what about 3 plus negative 4? Well, that's not going to work. That's going to give me negative 1. So my only option there was what we used first, which was negative 3. Perfect. So we'll use those. We have x minus 3. I got that right from here. And the other thing is going to be x, and then what's this? It's positive 4. Okay, perfect. If it asks for the roots, our roots, remember we just flipped the sign, so we're going to get x equals positive 3 now, and we're going to flip the sign from that positive 4, and we're going to get negative 4. Perfect. Okay, let's try one more example, and I think we should be good because that'll cover all of our cases. Let's try x squared minus 7x plus 12. Okay, here, what are our two numbers? Well, we need numbers that multiply to positive 12 and add up to negative 7. Okay, no problem. So we need things that add up to negative 7, and we need things that multiply to positive 12. Now, stop. What do you think you know if your number that you're multiplying to is positive? Well, it means we have the same sign. So it means we're either going to have positive positive or we're going to have negative negative. So our two numbers that we're going to try to figure out, they're either both going to be positive or they're both going to be negative. And I'll give you another little hint if you want it. Since we're adding up to a negative number, well, what do you think they're going to be? Yeah, they're probably going to both be negative. So let's try to figure out what numbers are going to multiply to 12. Well, we know 1 and 12 is an option. Unfortunately, that is not going to add up to 7. Another option would be 2 and 6. That looks good. 2 and 6, however, will add up to 8, so that's not so good for us. The other thing that multiplies to 12 is 3 and 4. Perfect. 3 times 4 is 12, and 3 plus 4 is 7, but we need it to be negative 7. So what do we do? Well, we know that both of our numbers are going to be negative. So we have negative 3 times negative 4. That does give us positive 12. And negative 3 plus negative 4 does give us negative 7. And those are going to be our magic numbers. So our next line would look like this. X, and then what's our magic number? Minus 3. And we have x, and then what's our magic number? It's going to be minus 4. And if I asked you for the roots, you'd flip the signs and you'd say x equals 3 and x equals 4. And that is it. A couple quick reviews for trinomials.